All right. Thank you guys for joining in. This is the second episode of Liberty Dad Talk since I've got things started back up. And by started back up, I mean kind of fumbling my way along, dealing with all kind of new stuff, trying to get some things worked out. But the show must go on, and here we are. Tonight, I am pleased to bring in Michael Pickens, and we're going to talk about teaching your children to start a business. Like, how great is that? And I think this actually should appeal to virtually every libertarian, because in my opinion, libertarians of all people should be some of the most entrepreneurial. They should have some of the strongest entrepreneurial spirits out there, just because we really talk a whole lot about independence, particularly from the government. So what does that leave you? Well, anyway, let's go ahead and bring Michael in and get this show on the road. Good sir, how are you?
DL, I am doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on Dad Talk.
Absolutely. So you reached out and you were like, hey, I want to be on the show. And I was like, all right, this is awesome. What you want to talk about? And then you were like, hey, my daughter has a business. So let's talk about the business. Let's talk about, your role in that as a dad. Let's just talk about everything about children having a business, because I think it's a wonderful idea.
Sure, absolutely. So one thing, when I was growing up, I was never taught that entrepreneurship was even an option, right?
Okay.
When I graduated high school, I was not prepared for the real world, right? I worked I think my first job was part-time as a janitor in a school, and then in a restaurant washing dishes.
Right.
And then moved up as a busser and a server, and then in the kitchen. And I worked for other people until my early 20s. And
Wow.
I didn't even know entrepreneurship was an option until I started getting into personal development and, reading books like The Success Principles by Jack Canfield and Maximum Confidence, and, a few other books like that, Think and Grow Rich, right? You start learning about these things. And it was in my early 20s when I really started learning about entrepreneurship. And now, as a dad, I want to make sure that our kids are prepared, when they turn 18. And it's a little different because we homeschool. So they're not going to, graduate high school. When I graduated high school, I wasn't prepared. But they're, already, even our 8-year-old, she's about to turn 9. She's working on getting her business started. She's got lots of ideas and she's going through it. And we're, talking to her about what might work, what might not work, and all that good stuff. And then talking about our 14-year-old daughter who has a business. Her business is called Caroline's Carbs, and she has a little bakery, and she makes baked goods, and she sells monthly subscription boxes. And right now she's doing a Valentine's special, but she's making $1,000-$2,000 a month right now at 14 years old. Right. And she is saving up for a car. And this is a big deal. When I turned 15 and a half, I was able to get my permit, but I had to ask my mom for a vehicle, right? And she had to help me, and I got to use her vehicle. But now our daughter is going to be in a position to be able to purchase her own vehicle with her own money,
Right.
And one of the really important things behind this is that if anything happens to myself or her mom, like, we feel that she's in a position that she'll be just fine.
Right.
Yep, there it is. There's the website.
There it is. Got it pulled up so people can take a look. Yep. Caroline's Carbs right there, just in case people thought, man, he's not really telling the truth. Oh, he is.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we homeschool, and what that really means is we try to encourage our children to learn about the things that they're passionate about, right? To find their purpose in life. Whereas, in public school and government education, you're basically there for 9 hours a day. In each class, you're sat down with a group of 20 to 30 other people, and you're told what to think. You're told what is important, right? And most of the time, in those classes, I don't remember the last time I've used algebra or chemistry or, really a lot of the information there. I get basic English, basic math, things like that is used on a pretty consistent basis. But most of the other stuff Like, it's not really useful.
Right.
And I just feel like I wasted a lot of my childhood when I should have been focused on building a business or learning about business, learning about
Right.
financial freedom and financial independence and personal
Right.
development and confidence, right? So we're taught, get good grades, go to college, then go work for someone else your whole life. And then, maybe you'll be able to retire at 55, 60. And, it's just it's not something that
Right.
we're interested in for our children.
No, I agree. It's funny. My wife is actually more the entrepreneur. I'm like a work in progress for a very similar reason. I never really I was never taught to seek out something that you might be willing to do on your own and try to figure out everything.
Mhm.
Right. It was more like, hey, go get some sort of skill and then take it to somebody and then say, I would like to, trade this skill for some money, basically go beg for a job. And that's what I've done all my life. And even then, I wasn't really taught to kind of be like the go-getter. I mean, in certain areas I was, just because like if I was good at something and I could deliver something, I might over deliver a little bit. But I was never really. I'm hearing my son. I don't know what's going on. I'm not sure if he's throwing a fit. He could be angry. I don't know. So
where's Dad?
This is bedtime, and he didn't take a nap today. So we're in this stage where he's just turned 4 yesterday, and he doesn't take naps. Like, he just plays in his room until it's time for whatever next activity, and then trying to get him to bed early is just very difficult because of our schedules, because what we got going on. And so now here it's like 8:30 and he's showered up, and I'm not sure if he's angry or not. I got the headset on, but I heard something and I was like, I don't know what that is, but Mama's got it handled. So, but as I was saying, I was just taught to kind of go and just work,
Sure.
and not really be independent, which is weird because I actually have a large independent streak in me. I'm one that wants to learn things on my own. I just never really learned to really reach out for that. I can learn all this stuff on my own, then take it and utilize it to acquire resources, if you will. So
Sure.
I totally agree with you.
And I want to put this out there. There's nothing wrong with working for someone else, having a job where you show up 9 to 5
Right.
and that's it. There are absolutely benefits to that.
Sure.
I'm a business owner, and when I get home from work, I'm still thinking about things. Sometimes I have to send out agreements. Sometimes I have to work on, orders or marketing pieces or other things while I'm home, but at the same time, I have flexibility. Like today, I took the kids to homeschool karate. Every Tuesdays and Thursdays, Wednesday, there's a homeschool karate group, and I could take them at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I am my own boss, and I can leave and go take the kids and then, come back to work or whatever. It's the flexibility that comes along with that. I don't have to ask anyone's permission to do that.
Right.
But there's nothing wrong with having a 9 to 5 at all. I just want to be able to set our kids up, for the future, where they get to choose what they want to have in their life.
Right. And I think it's important to say that, because when I look at it, it's not that I look at it like I have a 9 to 5 we call it a W-2 job. I have a W-2 job. Right. And I don't think it's necessarily, I agree, it's not a bad idea, but what's better is if you were to raise your kids so that they could say, you know what, I'm just not interested in the entrepreneur effort that's going to be required for this, even if it's not right now. I would prefer to go and just work for somebody and let them deal with, all the marketing, all the legal stuff, all the things that basically are handled by somebody else, so that you can do a particular job for them. And then maybe later on in life, they say, you know what, I'm ready now. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they just continue on and they say, you know what, I'm going to go work. Like, I know people that used to love working in a factory. Like, they just would like, their existence was fulfilled by getting up, going to work at 7, getting off at like 5 o'clock or whatever, what have you, 4 or 5 o'clock, somewhere around there, coming home and watching TV and then enjoying their weekend,
Mhm.
maybe getting some overtime. And I just met people that's what they loved, and I was like, okay, well, that's great if that's what you like. But I do think that we should really instill in our kids that maybe options, whatever you want, rather than be like me and get old and then finally decide that you're going to try to take a plunge and do something, which, it has its drawbacks doing it at that age.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit more about kids being entrepreneurs, right?
Yes.
So there is the Tuttle twins have a couple books on children entrepreneurship. There's some other books. Rich Dad Poor Dad has a book for teenagers on entrepreneurship, and there's stuff out there that you can get your kids plugged into. And I think it's a really good idea to, at a very young age, is to teach them two things: is to create something and then learn how to sell that, whatever it is.
Right.
Right. And there's a lot of really easy business ideas that you could work with your kids to implement. Right. So making soap, making candles, doing baked goods, making jewelry. Like there's all these things that are fairly simple and not that expensive to do that they can learn how to do. And the cool thing is there's all these classes that are online, YouTube, master class. For example, Caroline, she's making cake pops. There was a class for $49 that she could take, and it was all online to learn how to make cake pops. Right. And that's something that, any kid can do and start learning, and then start selling these things and start making money. And then, get them a booth at the farmer's market. Right. So you're basically giving them an audience, right? Every Sunday, every Saturday, most places in the summer, they have farmers markets. Most cities have farmers markets. And the people who run these farmers markets love to have kid booths. They love to have young entrepreneurs, right? And people love to support them. So it's a way for your kid to learn how to create something, learn how to sell it, and then get the satisfaction from selling that at a profit, right? You can teach them, the analysis between the cost of the goods and then the retail price that they're selling it, the profit that's in between, and help them to budget between those costs, and then save some of that money for the things that they want in life. So they're no longer asking mom and dad to buy them whatever it is that they want. They now have a way to sell it. And in some areas, your kid can go door to door and try to sell whatever it is. The Girl Scouts kind of do this with the Girl Scout cookies, right?
Right.
However, the kids aren't really making that money. And it's such a small amount. It's kind of a ripoff. Get your kid to make their own cookies.
Right.
You have to make sure and put them through a food safety course. There's tons of online food safety courses where they can, make these baked goods in a sanitary environment. This is all important stuff in the process.
Right.
But it's good for them to learn that, because then they could take those skills later in life in the future too, with their own culinary, whatever, or, it's just awesome. Even if they do go and get a job, it's great for a resume to show that they've had a business in the past and they've created something. So
did you do anything like, I assume that there's a certain, like, maybe not a specific defined age where you say, all right, let's try to start your own business. But there is a time before, whenever that is, where, okay, maybe not quite yet, but we can start working on the skills, the things that you might, we'll learn this today, we'll learn this tomorrow, we'll learn this. And then eventually, once you're ready, we're going to put them all together. Did you do anything like that, or incrementally?
So around age 7, children's brains start using their prefrontal cortex more. And what that means is they are becoming more aware. And that's when they can start using their critical thinking skills a lot better. Whereas before that, they're mainly operating in theta brainwaves. So it's mostly their subconscious mind. It's mostly reactions. They're reacting to their environment. They're reacting to emotional impulses. After the age of 7, that's really when they can start thinking about these things deeper and understanding more complex issues. So, Amelia, our 8-year-old, she is on that path. She's about to turn 9, but we're not quite there yet. Caroline, when she was 12, she started making jewelry, macrame, and she started selling it at the farmer's market. And my wife had a chocolate booth, so she also sold her jewelry there on the side. So that really helped out. And then, we talked more about that. And jewelry was great to get her started because she created something. She was able to practice it. She was able to perfect it. She was able to sell it. However, when someone comes to a farmer's market and they purchase, a necklace or a bracelet, the next time they come next week, like, they don't need another necklace. They don't need another bracelet. They already have one. How many bracelets or necklaces can someone want? So we talked about having more of consumable goods, right? To where someone is going to, eat a cookie and they're going to like it. And then they're going to come back next week and they're like, I like that cookie. What do you have now? What do you have this week? Oh, you have a different type of cookie. You have a different type of cupcake. You have a different, and then they'll buy that and they'll eat that. So it's a consumable, right? Which is why I suggested soap, which is why I suggested candles, baked goods. These are items that someone will buy, use, and then buy again.
Right.
So
that's pretty neat.
Yeah. Age 11, 12, you could really start, expanding on this stuff and teaching them and giving them the experience that they need through the process.
Gotcha. We have a friend there. So my wife's in real estate, and we have a friend, and I don't remember how old their children are, but they have them do chores at home and then create an invoice for mom and dad. So rather than like, hey, I do my chores and I get $1, it's more like I got an invoice and I'm giving it to mom and dad. Now I don't know how far they take that, but I think it's a pretty neat idea.
That's a really good idea. Yeah.
Create an invoice here. Let's do some bookkeeping or whatever, to kind of keep things on track and just kind of give you an idea. So I think that's pretty neat. I definitely, my son's 4, so he's a little bit not ready yet for any of that kind of stuff, but he plays with money all the time. So he does he's got like some quarters and some dimes and
sure.
So and he plays with it and he understands like going to the store and he's like, we need money. And like, I'll say like, hey, why are you touching? You got money? He's like, well, you got money.
He's getting it.
Or I picked up something. He's like, Dad, do you have money? And I was like, well, I didn't have money, like cash. And he told me to like put it back because I didn't have any money.
Oh man. I really like that invoicing idea. We do pay our kids for chores, and one thing that's really helped Amelia with her reading is that we pay her for books, and now she's on chapter books, and she's way ahead of most kids in government education. But yeah, a buck a chapter book, and she's just going through them. And she came down with a stack, of chapter books, and she reads to us every night. And she came down, she's like, all right, I'm ready to get paid. When she goes to the store, she's got her purse and she's got her money, and we're teaching her now about saving and, not just spending her money on stuffies and, whatever else, yogurt and whatever else that she really wants, to save her money. So these are really good lessons for kids to learn that I wasn't taught when I was growing up. So
so are there where are the pain points that you've found in doing this? Because everything has challenges. What are some of the pain points that people might look out for or just kind of like be aware of, maybe where there's like the child is getting very, very frustrated with something?
Sure. That was the first thing that I was thinking, because when they're doing something new, there is always a learning curve, right? And there's a phrase, practice makes perfect. And it's a horrible phrase. And I hate it because it's not true. Practice makes better. So you teach your kid that every time they practice, they're just going to get a little bit better versus practice makes perfect. Where I remember when I was a kid, you practice at something. Well, I practiced and I'm not perfect. I'm just not good at this. I'm just not meant for this. And that's what kids think. But if you were to teach them incremental gains, and video games are a great way to teach kids real life, right? Because in most video games, there's a character, And as that character, you take that character through the game, they start gaining experience points, right? They defeat an opponent, you solve a puzzle, that character gains experience points. Then you can use that experience points to level up your character, level up the skills, right? So if we teach our kids that they are the character in their own video game, and every time they practice something, they're leveling up their skills until eventually they're going to be at a high level skill where they're going to be able to make beautiful cakes like you see on Caroline's website. You know, she made those cakes. That's, you know, those aren't stock photos. She makes beautiful cake pops. She makes beautiful, you know, different pastries, you know, because she's practiced. And guess what? The beginning, whenever she starts something new, she's throwing a ton of stuff away because she's got to figure it out. She's got to learn the process. And if they know that they're going to mess up in the beginning from the start, the frustration goes way down. You give them permission to make mistakes and say, this is just part of the process, because a mistake is only a mistake if you don't learn from it. When you learn from it, it becomes a lesson. And there is no way to become successful in life without failing, without making those mistakes. You got to fail first, and then you got to move forward. And then if you teach them, if you fail faster, you're going to be more successful faster, right? FAIL is an acronym, first attempt in learning, FAIL, first attempt in learning. It's all a part of the process. And if you can teach them that the failures are all a part of the process of reaching success, then they're going to be more excited about making mistakes, and they're going to be way less frustrated. And when they do make the mistakes, you get excited about it and you're not frustrated, because if you're frustrated, they're going to be frustrated, right? So if you're excited about it, then it's going to benefit everyone. And that pitfall that may come with it, the learning curve, is going to be much shorter. So
got it. You know, it's interesting that you mentioned the mistakes and learning to accept mistakes. We've been looking into, like, you know, everybody's on all about like virtual, or not virtual, the VPK, like I can't remember what it stands for exactly. But it's basically like the pre-K before you get to kindergarten, and everybody wants to get kids in sooner. And so we were looking at like some Montessori schools, and one of the guys actually was talking to us, and he said, sometimes a child is working on something and they're not quite doing it right. And he said, we just let them go. And he said, because a lot of times there's still something to be learned even in the mistake. And then later they might, in a way that doesn't reinforce, hey, you made a mistake, you should have done it the right way the first time, in a way that does not reinforce that, then they kind of maybe will go back and then say, okay, well, what about this? Or and I don't remember the exact example that he gave, but it was basically like, let them make a mistake. Don't tell them that they're necessarily make a mistake, but then show them how it's, you know, how, at a later point, how it's done, or sometimes maybe not. Maybe let them, you know, have that mistake just because they've learned something else in the way.
So this is the thing. I cannot show Caroline how to make anything. Like everything that she bakes, she's learning from other people who are experts at doing it. And if I were to even try to help her do this stuff, it would, you know, she'd probably, you know, brush me off and tell me to do something else, right? So you don't have to be an expert, but there are resources out there to help your kids. You know, there's classes, online school, and there's so much out there now that didn't exist, you know, when I was growing up.
Right.
So
goodness, there's so much out there to learn, and like YouTube and all these different places where you can go and find instructional, you know, videos and whatnot, like just whatever you want to learn. We right now, and hopefully this will go toward my son, you know, having the opportunity to be an entrepreneur, even if he chooses otherwise. We allow him to just basically get into most everything. We don't like, as long as I can keep it safe.
As long as it's safe.
Right. Like, so he's like, I'll give you an example, since we're talking about like baking and cooking and stuff like that. He's 4, probably like 2 years ago, he was on the stove with me, and I would hold one hand. I'd have one of his hands on the pan and one of his hands on the cooking utensil. And then I would have my hands over his hands directing him. You know, right on the stove there, cooking, you know, I don't know, some sort of grilled something or other, right? and he loves it. He loves playing a role in it. And so that was like 2 years ago. And I'm just like, all right, well, I think I can keep you pretty much safe. I posted a video on Twitter, like maybe not even a month ago. I needed to stain a piece of wood for something that I was working on. So we went out and he put on his little Home Depot apron that he got from going to one of their project things. And we put goggles on and his face mask on just to make sure nothing splashed, because we were working with stain, like actual wood stain. And I sat there and I helped him kind of get the motions, and then I just let him go. And he was, dipping it in and doing it, because I feel like what I want him to learn is that it's okay to try things. And the limitation is, does he want it? Right? Like, that's what I want the limitation to be, not, well, I can't do that, it's too hard, or any of that stuff. I'd rather him just say, you know what? All it's going to take is however long it takes me to figure this out. That's what's necessary for me to be able to do whatever it is, whether it's a hobby or entrepreneurship.
Yep.
So, and I think he, like, people are surprised because, like, we'll show pictures of him like cutting his own strawberries and stuff. And, most, like, if he's by himself and we're just kind of letting him be unguided a few feet away, then we generally will give him like a butter knife. But he's held, like sharper knives, not like necessarily a big, huge butcher knife, but a sharper knife. And he knows how to cut stuff on his own. And so I don't know, maybe in a couple of years, maybe not a couple of years, but maybe in 5 or 6 years, he'll be an entrepreneur, because he'll be like, I can do it.
Yeah, Amelia, who's 8, she makes breakfast. She can cut potatoes and onions and bell peppers and carrots, and she helps out in the kitchen. She can handle a knife and not cut herself, and But you're right. You have to help them along and be encouraging in the process.
Yeah.
Could she hurt herself? Well, yeah, absolutely. There's risks in most everything, but it's better to teach them when they're young versus, there are kids that graduate high school that don't know how to cook breakfast, and it's really unfortunate. So there's not a whole lot of personal development in government education.
No, there's not. And it was, like, my mom taught me, like, she was just like, she dragged me along on everything that she was doing. So my mom was the one that used all the tools in the house. Right. So I learned, how to cook and clean from my mom. I learned how to do all these tools and all this, use all these manner of tools and fix all these things in the house. And when I was in high school, I went to home ec and I was bored. I was like, I don't know how to do all this. I've been doing this for like years. Like, this is terrible. And like other students in high school, it was like new to them. So I was just like, it's kind of amazing, I guess, what people end up leaving school and not knowing. And maybe I take it for granted sometimes. I don't know.
So I used to put on a lot of personal development seminars and training for political candidates for the Libertarian Party. I haven't done that recently, but there is something that I talk about in there. There's a book called 10,000 Hours by Malcolm Gladwell. And he talks in that book to become a master. And I'm talking about the top 0.001% of an industry, or the best of the best, a master in it. You need to dedicate 10,000 hours or more into the practice of that topic, right? And then there's a book called 20 Hours with Joshua Kaufman. And in that book, he goes to explain that to become semi-proficient at any skill, you need about 20 hours, right? So this is semi-proficient. So to become semi-proficient, you need about 20 hours, and to become a master, you need 10,000. So if someone learns that to become semi-proficient, you only need 20 hours, well, that's reasonable. That you can do that. You can spend 3 days, 6 hours a day, 8 hours a day, and learn a new skill, right? So that's what we have to teach our kids. That if you just put a little bit of time, you can level up your character. And the level up analogy with video games is really, really good, because kids can relate, and you have to be able to relate. Now, obviously, your son is 4, so he's not really into video games yet. but he will be. And it's great when you are able to link those two together. Right. So
yeah, that sounds neat. And I'm definitely going to be looking for that book, because that sounds interesting. 20. I've never heard of that book. I've heard of the 10,000 hours.
Yeah, Joshua Kaufman is the author, and he has a TED Talk on it. And the TED Talk, it's not very long, and you can watch it, and he kind of explains the concept very quickly. But the book itself is full of examples, real life examples of just, if you spend 20 hours practicing one thing, playing piano on one song, you can become semi-proficient at it.
Right. That's neat.
So
do you find, because I assume you're involved in like the homeschool groups, and so I assume you interact with other parents. Do you find that, let me ask you a different way. I feel that children, their default state is curiosity, and all you really got to do is just kind of either clear things out of the way for them so they can explore that curiosity, or help guide them, or a little bit of both. Right. But you don't really need to do a lot of prodding per se, almost kind of like just get out of the way. Is, at least that's how we've seen our own son, my whole one example. So would you agree with that that's the default state for at least most children?
Sure. Yeah. Most kids are curious. However, they're also sponges, right? So it's very important to be aware of what's in their environment. And, that's one of the reasons why we homeschool, because most public school kids, parents don't really care what's in the kids' environment. And if they're watching garbage TV and commercials, they become focused on the wrong things. There's a lot of teenagers that are focused on the wrong things right now, boyfriends, girlfriends, sexual identity and transitions and things like that, where, we're seeing this in kids that are similar ages to our kids. Our kids are focused on making money, building businesses, becoming successful. Their kids are focusing on transitioning. They're focused on drama in school, right? And things that don't really matter and that aren't going to benefit them later in life. Music is a big one, right? People don't understand how powerful lyrics are. If you're listening to music, whatever the lyrics are, they're going in your subconscious mind. And if they're, lyrics about, heartbreak or whatever it is, drug use or whatever, like that's what's going to be going into the subconscious mind. And whatever goes into the subconscious mind eventually will come back out. So if you're putting good things in the subconscious mind, you're going to get good. If you put negative things, you're going to get negative that come out. So making sure your kids are aware of this also, so in the homeschool community, we found that a lot of parents are more aware of this. They're more aware of this, and their kids are focused on more positive things versus in the government-run education, they're focused on more negative things and things that don't really matter and aren't really going to benefit them. So
are there any limitations that you as a family kind of impose that you think went toward helping to foster, or did you just really more guide your children along?
So we've never had TV, right?
Okay.
We've never had cable. That's not something, we do have Netflix, right? And there's YouTube, and you can put on different shows. And, one of our favorite shows is called Outdoor Boys. And it's about a guy and his little sons, and they go out and they build shelters, and they dig holes, and they show how to cook food, and they're doing all this cool stuff outdoors, right? And it's on YouTube, and but that's something that's controlled, right? And it's super positive, and it shows kids how to build stuff and do things like that, versus just putting them down in front of a TV where there's commercials being played that you don't control any of that really. And the kids nowadays, they're very if they watch commercials a lot, like they want to know that they're wearing designer clothes, or they want to, they brands are very important to them, right? Things that aren't really that important in real life if you look at the bigger picture of things. So it definitely is controlled to a point, So
it sounds,
I answered that question.
Yeah, it sounds a lot less like we didn't impose these things. This is just how our family behaved. We didn't have a TV.
Yeah.
Not like I had a TV, but I didn't let my kids watch it. It was, we didn't have one at all. Right. And I think
Yeah.
that's,
So the option
they
wasn't there.
see
So
what
a
mom
lot
and
of,
dad are doing.
yeah, kids nowadays have problems with ADD,
Right.
ADHD, and the parents or the doctors, instead of like asking, hey, what's their diet like? How much sugar are they taking in every single day? The doctor's like, oh, we'll just put them on Adderall or Ritalin or something like that, you know. And with us, we don't really have that issue for the most part, even though Caroline bakes. But she's aware, but we just don't have candy in the house. We just don't have a lot of sweets in the house. That's just not something that's available, right? And you know, talking to other parents when their kids have these issues, it's like, well, don't feed them that stuff. Well, that's what they like to eat. You know, it's like, you know, well, we just have ice cream in the freezer, and they just love eating ice cream. Well, stop stocking your freezer with ice cream. Stop buying it. You know, and then to a lot of parents, like a lot of people are just refuse. So you know, but if you don't offer it, if it's not available, then the kid can't get addicted to it.
Right. Yeah. Our Achilles heel is grandma. She lives with us, and I'm like, well, I have this thing. I'm like, you know, if an 80-year-old woman wants to spoil her grandkids, I mean, I'm not going to take that away. But for the most part, we eat pretty healthy. We don't, and my son, actually, he would rather play with candy than actually eat it in most cases. Like he will, like trick or treating, we'll go out and get all the candy, and he'll come back and he'll play with it. Like he'll open it, pour it out, play with it like they're toys, and then go on about his way and just leave the candy there sitting there. Like, I mean, I think there's, he gets into a little bit of candy, but he's not just sitting there pounding candy left and right. So I guess we're fortunate there.
One thing that we've done with candy from Halloween is we've created gingerbread houses with the candy afterwards. And we have a huge box of leftover Halloween candy that's ready for, these elaborate gingerbread houses,
Nice.
That's an idea that you can use for that. However, one year, we did the gingerbread house, and, our 8-year-old was just acting up, and she just was having a hard time getting to bed, and she was throwing fits all of a sudden. We noticed that gingerbread house is looking different. It looks a lot different. And what we found out is she was sneaking the candy off of the gingerbread house and eating it. Right. So it happens. You have to be aware.
Yeah. So how do your children handle being so different from other children? Because everything you've said is quite different than the typical child that I would run into. So, but they're going to run into these kids, right? At the playground, wherever, somewhere.
Yeah. So it's interesting because our kids can talk to adults, right? Our kids can carry on a conversation with adults, whereas there's other kids, in karate class, for example, right? They had a barbecue, and I was there with our 2 daughters, and we invited one of the other boys that was around Caroline's age to come sit with us. And instead of saying, oh yeah, I'll come sit with you, all good, he kind of just froze up and got all wide-eyed and turned and walked away, like he didn't know what to do, right? So, and Caroline looked at me like, oh, what's going on? This is weird. So being able to identify these things and being aware that our kids actually think they're advanced, and they don't have a lot of the same social cues and limitations that other kids, because in school, right, you're put in a classroom with the kids all your own age. Where our kids, in homeschool group and in karate, there's kids of all ages, and there's adults, so that they communicate. And then with the farmers markets as well, they're talking to adults that are coming up and wanting to buy stuff from them, and they understand having those communication skills help them sell.
Right.
So
yeah. I remember reading something a long time ago, and I've kind of tried to do the same thing with my son. There was this book, and they were talking about the child was on the way to go see the doctor. And so, the mom or the dad was like, hey, do you have anything you want to ask the doctor? Yeah, I want to ask him about this, blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool. So they get there, the doctor does, the checkup or whatever. And then right before the end, like the parents like, all right, you had something you wanted to ask the doctor. And then basically made sure that the doctor was giving attention to the child. And the moral of the story was teaching a child that, their voice, their perspective matters. And just because they're children doesn't mean that they necessarily can get brushed off so easily, right? Like
Mhm.
they're there to see a doctor, but if they have a question, then the doctor should hear their question and then they should expect
Sure.
an answer. And so we try to do that as well. And, there's not, more than just obviously the doctors, and he's not quite old enough to really ask questions of the doctor per se, at least not ones that the doctor should be, needs to answer. But,
Mhm.
but we basically try to do that, like have conversations with them, tell him like, hey, when he's frustrated, use your words and, all these other
Yep.
things to kind of help prod him along to basically say, you're not quite equal per se, but you are in a sense, right?
Correct. Yeah. And as they get older, they will call you out on your bullshit. That
He already does.
that yeah. So that happens, and you have to
Mhm,
be aware. And one thing that I've learned is you have to be willing to apologize when you're wrong,
mhm.
right?
Yep.
And you know, if your temper gets out of hand or whatever, you
Right.
have to be willing to apologize. You have to be willing to explain the
Right.
situation. It's a learning curve. It's a learning experience, and look at
Mhm.
it like that.
Oh, yeah.
But they're little people, and it's your role as a parent
Mhm.
to teach them the skills they need to be successful. And that's really important, because in the world that we live in today, there's so many young people who graduate high school and they go out in the real world and they are not prepared. They're
Right.
not prepared. And that's your role as a parent, is to
Yeah.
prepare them, prepare
Yeah.
your kids the best you can.
Mhm.
Right now, I understand my parents, they didn't have the skills necessary to teach me entrepreneurship.
Right.
They both worked for the government, and they expected, like, when I graduated, they didn't help me anymore in life. Whereas, my mom said, well, I'll pay for your college and I'll help you out if you become a teacher. She was a
Right.
teacher, right? And my dad was like, I'll pay for your stuff. I'll help you out if you become an electrical lineman. Guess what? He was an electrical lineman,
Right.
right? So they were both willing to help and support me after age 18, as long as I did what they wanted.
Mm.
And that is not a good place to be in if you're a parent, right?
Right.
So we're of the mindset, like, we're going to help Caroline, we're going to help Amelia with whatever it is they want to do, whatever it is that makes them happy, to an extent, as long as they're not hurting themselves,
Right.
right? Business wise, though, if they're on a career path, we're going to help them out. If Caroline decides to continue with baking, we're going to help her out. If she decides to go down a different path, let's say she gets 2 years from now, she's just like tired of baking. She doesn't want to do it anymore. She wants to go to on a different path.
Mhm.
Fantastic. Let's help you do that.
Right.
Right. As long as it's a path that leads towards some semblance of success and independence and
Mhm.
financial stability. So,
Right. I actually, while we were sitting there, I was thinking of a story about how we actually encourage our son to engage with adults,
mhm,
at whatever level he can. So a while back, about a month and a half ago, he surprised the heck out of us. We're at the restaurant, and normally what happens is the waitress or the waiter comes over and they're like, "Hey, can I get your drink orders?" And then, all the adults drink, order their drinks, soda, coffee, whatever. And then we say, "Oh, we say, well, what do you have for kids?" Right? For them to drink. Because we're asking like what kind of juice do they have? We're, more
yeah.
specific. So one day we finish ordering, and before we could ask for him, he just kind of leans up, like he was like on his elbows, leans in, and he said, "What do you have for kids?" And it it totally stunned. I was like, and so, but we went with it, right? So we just kind of like look over at the waitress, and then she looked down at him, which was good, and
Yeah.
she told him what he had. And then he said, "I'll have an apple juice," or something like that.
Yep.
And then all she did was make his quick look over at mom just to make sure, like, "Hey, we good with this?" And, my wife was like, Yep. And that was that. And so now he asks for his own drink every single time. He's like, what do you got for kids? And then he'll order, or sometimes he'll just say, do you have chocolate milk or something like that? You know? So it was just really amazing because I wasn't expecting it. And he just did it. And I was like, all right, well, he clearly understands the concept here. So what you got for kids? He wants to know.
Yeah, so I got a story about that. One time Caroline wanted Starbucks, right?
Mm-hmm.
She really wanted Starbucks. I said, okay, but you're gonna have to order. And she kind of like laughed and like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then we pull in and she was in the back seat and I rolled her window down and she just like froze. Right. It's like, okay, Kara, put in your order. And she refused to do it. So we left. We drove through, all good.
Oh,
The
wow.
next time, she's like, oh, I want Starbucks. I'm like, hey, you're gonna have to order. She's like, fine. And then we pull in and she did it.
Right.
That she wants it. She's gonna have
Right.
to ask for it. So now when we go to restaurants, it's funny you say that, because last night we went to a restaurant and they both order for themselves. And Amelia asked, what juices do you have? And they had apple juice and she got apple juice. And she asked the waitress where the bathroom was because she needed to use the bathroom.
Right.
It's like, making them independent to where, not making them, but,
right.
Encouraging them and showing them that they have value and what they have to say is important, and they can choose for themselves. Right. And they have autonomy over us, in things that they want for themselves in their life. So,
right. That's awesome. Yeah. Yep. I'm looking forward to more, more experiences like that. So who knows what'll happen next, but it'll be fun. So
yeah, absolutely.
We're rounding toward at the end of our hour. So any final words on encouraging children to start a business that, people should just keep in mind?
Yes. If you have kids and you're listening to this right now, what I want you to do is go to carolinescarbs.com and purchase one of her baked good boxes. And then when you get that in the mail, you can show your kids, here, look at this 14-year-old baked this, and she created her own business. So you can encourage your children by using our children to encourage entrepreneurship. Right. So she's got, every month she creates a new box. There's 4 different baked goods in that box. So you can purchase a box, get it sent directly to you, show your kids, show her the website, show them the website. Yeah. So that's what I would recommend. If you're looking to encourage your children to start a business, show them other children that have started businesses, show them that they can do it. So
absolutely.
And then obviously there's classes out there, kids entrepreneurial stuff that they can go through, and yep, there you go, pictures.
All right, some pictures, that way people know this is legit. This is so carolinescarbs.com, CAROLINES carbs.com. So check that out, folks, and encourage your own children to find a passion and then help them pursue it. So,
yep, absolutely.
All right, sir. Well, it was good talking with you. I'm gonna do my closing here real quick, and then we'll chat a minute or two after the show here. So, give me just a second.
So much.
All right, folks. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Dad Talk. This is the opportunity for dads to come on and simply talk about what is important to them, and it doesn't matter what it is. If you look back at some of the past episodes, we've talked about mental health. We've talked about, Michael had mentioned some kids are looking at trans issues. We talked about, we had one father come on and that's what he wanted to talk about. So if you're a father, it has to be a dad, no moms. I'm sorry. Somebody's going to have to start, Liberty Mom Talk or something. But if you're a dad or a dad who's passionate about anything, it doesn't matter. Could be working on cars, and you want to talk about it in the context of how that is, you're applying that to your relationship with your children, then send me a message. You can find me on Twitter, Liberty Dad Pod. You can send me a message, send me an email, libertydadpodcast@gmail. But I would love to hear from you. I want to talk to as many dads as I can about whatever is important to them, because this show is all about raising dad voices. So reach out, and I hope to hear from you guys again. Normally, this show will be on Wednesday night. Last night, as I said early on in the show, my son had a birthday yesterday, and some things were colliding on the calendar. So Michael was very gracious to move till tonight. So go ahead and remember carolinescarbs.com, and then also find Liberty Dad. You can find me all over the internet. So do that. And until next time, have a good one.